Pay up, or you won't see your daughter again. My son-in-law said it like he was ordering a coffee. Cold, casual, bored. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, just stood there in the corner of the room. Her eyes were glazed, distant, like she was watching a movie of her own life. They thought I was a lonely old man. They thought I was a structural engineer, whose mind was crumbling like bad concrete. They looked at my gray hair and my walking stick and saw a victim. They were about to learn that this old man knew how to fight a war. If this story finds you, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps to know I'm not alone in this world. Let me back up and tell you how a perfectly reasonable Tuesday afternoon led to the most dangerous day of my life. My name is Thomas. For 40 years I built skyscrapers. I dealt with steel, concrete, and gravity. The laws of physics are simple. If you calculate the load correctly, if you pour the foundation deep enough, the building stands. If you miss a stress point, people die. I was good at my job. I built bridges that spanned raging rivers. I built towers that swayed in the wind, but never bowed. I thought I had built my life the same way. I was 64 years old, retired, wealthy in the way that makes people polite to your face and speculative behind your back. My first wife, Martha, passed away 10 years ago. That loss didn't just break my heart. It compromised my structural integrity. For 40 years, she had been the load-bearing wall of my existence. When she was gone, the roof didn't cave in immediately, but the house groaned. The silence in my life became a physical weight, pressing down on the support beams until I thought I would snap. That was when I met Linda. Linda was everything the silence wasn't. She was vibrant, loud, and younger, significantly so. She filled the empty, echoing hallways of my sprawling estate with music, catered parties, and the clinking of crystal. She was a fresh coat of paint on a condemned building. I knew deep down that the foundation was still cracked, but the facade looked spectacular. I let myself be blinded by the color. Then there was my daughter, Emily, my world, my legacy. She was soft-hearted, too trusting, much like her mother. She had married Jason 2 years ago. Jason was a real estate developer, slick, charming, with a handshake that felt just a little too practiced. He had ambition that burned in his eyes like a fever. I wanted them to be safe. I wanted to be the provider, the protector, the arch that held the family together. I gave them a house as a wedding gift, a massive white-pillared colonial on Maple Avenue. It was solid, traditional, a fortress for their future. Life felt stable. The load was balanced. But as any structural engineer will tell you, catastrophic failure doesn't happen all at once. It's rarely an explosion. It starts with a hairline fracture, a tiny invisible fissure in the steel caused by metal fatigue. You can't see it with the naked eye. You can't hear it, but it's there, spreading, waiting for the one storm that brings the whole thing down. On a Tuesday in October, under a sky the color of a bruised plum, I found the crack. The air pressure was dropping rapidly. My left hip, reconstructed 3 years ago, throbbed in rhythm with the approaching low front. I was driving my old Ford pickup truck. I kept it around despite Linda's protests. She wanted me in the Bentley, insulated from the world, but I liked the Ford. I liked the vibration of the engine through the steering wheel. It felt honest. It felt mechanical. It was something I could fix with a wrench, unlike the rest of my life. I was heading home from the hardware store, a few heavy boxes of galvanized bolts rattling in the bed. The traffic on the main boulevard was gridlocked, red taillights bleeding into the gray afternoon. Impatient and nursing the ache in my hip, I decided to take a shortcut through Maple Avenue. I wasn't planning to stop at Emily's house. I knew Jason was downtown showing a commercial property to investors. He had mentioned it 3 times at dinner on Sunday, boasting about the commission. Emily was at her prenatal yoga class. The house should have been empty, but as I turned the corner, the tires crunching over fallen, wet leaves, a feeling hit me. It wasn't a thought, it was a frequency, a dissonance. The instinct of an engineer walking onto a site and knowing without looking at the blueprints that the angles were wrong. I slowed the truck. The house loomed on the left. It was 2:15 p.m. The street was deserted, but the curtains in the master bedroom were drawn tight, blackout shades. Then I saw it. Parked against the side gate, jammed aggressively into the shadows of the overgrown rhododendrons, was a car. It wasn't in the driveway. It was tucked away, as if the driver was trying to make the vehicle physically smaller. A silver Mercedes. My heart skipped a beat, a hard physical thump against my ribs that made me gasp. I knew that car. I knew the lease terms. I knew the VIN number. I paid the bill every month. It was Linda's car. I took my foot off the gas and let the truck idle forward, the engine purring softly. I checked the dashboard clock again, 2:16 p.m. Linda had told me explicitly, with a detailed itinerary, that she was in the city today. She had a lunch date with her sister, Brenda. She had even shown me the brochure for the French bistro they were going to. She had complained about the traffic she would face on the bridge. Why is my wife's car at my son-in-law's house? And more importantly, why is it hidden? A cold, oily feeling crawled down my spine. It wasn't jealousy. Not yet. It was the primal system of a man realizing the safety mechanism has failed. The math didn't add up. The load didn't balance. The vectors were all pointing in the wrong direction. I pulled the truck over 3 houses down, parking behind the trunk of a massive ancient oak tree. I killed the engine. Silence rushed in, heavy and oppressive. The suburbs are never truly quiet. There is always the hum of HVAC units, the distant bark of a dog, the wind and the dying leaves. But this silence felt manufactured. It felt like the breath held before a scream. A normal man would call his wife. A normal man would drive up the driveway, honk the horn, and ask what was going on. He would demand an explanation, but I have never been a normal man. I am a man who checks the bolts twice. I am a man who reads the fine print. I am a man who knows that what people say is merely decoration. What they do is the structure. I opened the truck door, holding the handle to keep it from clicking. I stepped out onto the asphalt. The wind bit through my flannel shirt. I closed the door, guiding it into the latch with soft pressure until it engaged without a sound. My hips screamed in protest, but I ignored it. I walked along the neighbor's fence, sticking to the deep shadows cast by the evergreen hedge. My heart hammered in my ears. A frantic, wet drumbeat. Thump, thump, thump. I felt ridiculous. I felt like a senile old fool spying on his own family. I prayed to God that I was wrong. I prayed that I would peer into that window and see them planning a surprise party for my upcoming birthday. I prayed to see Jason helping Linda with a surprise gift. I reached the property line. The house towered above me, dark and silent against the storm clouds. I moved through the side garden, my boots sinking into the wet, pungent mulch. I approached the library window. It was a room I had designed specifically for Jason. Mahogany shelves, reinforced floor joists, soundproof walls, or so I thought. The window was cracked open an inch at the bottom. A thin ribbon of darkness, likely open to let cigarette smoke escape. Jason had a habit he thought he hid from us. I pressed my back against the rough brick wall. I held my breath, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. I didn't hear laughter. I didn't hear the rustle of wrapping paper. He's complaining about the headaches again. Linda's voice drifted out through the crack. I froze. It wasn't the voice she used with me. That voice was sweet, melodic, slightly breathless. This voice was sharp, metallic, cold. It was the voice of a demolition foreman, giving orders. Good, Jason replied. His tone was dismissive, arrogant, the tone he used with waiters when he thought no one was watching. That means the compound is working. How long until he's incoherent? Incoherent. I stood paralyzed in the mulch, the cold seeping into my bones. The world didn't just stop. It tilted on its axis. The beam had snapped. The roof was coming down. Dr. Evans said another 2 weeks at this dosage, Linda said. Her voice was calm, clinical, like she was discussing the fee balance of a swimming pool. The memory loss is already establishing itself. Yesterday I moved his keys 3 times. He spent an hour looking for them, overturning the sofa cushions. He was sweating, Jason, actually sweating. She laughed then. It wasn't the warm, throaty chuckle she used at charity gallers. It was a dry, cruel sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. He was terrified. He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes and asked if he was losing it. He thinks he's getting Alzheimer's, just like his father. I froze. My blood, usually warm and steady, turned to absolute ice in my veins. My keys, I remembered yesterday. The panic rising in my chest as I searched the entryway table, then the kitchen counter, then the pockets of my coat. I had prided myself on my sharp mind, my organizational systems, Losing those keys had felt like the first slip down a steep, dark slope. I had felt broken. I had felt old. And she had been watching me. Not with concern, but with the detached fascination of a scientist watching a rat in a maze. "Good," Jason said. I heard the clink of glass against glass. "Pouring a drink. But can we speed it up? The investors in Vegas are getting impatient. If I don't get that $2 million to cover the gap by the first, they aren't just going to sue me. They're going to break my legs." "Patience," Linda soothed. "If we rush the dosage, he might go into cardiac arrest. We need him alive to sign the power of attorney. If he dies before he signs, the estate goes into probate, and Emily gets control. We can't have that." "He'll sign," Jason scoffed. "He's weak. He trusts me," Linda said, and hearing her say it was like taking a knife to the gut. "He's a lonely, pathetic old man who thinks he bought a second chance at love. He has no idea he bought an executioner." I stared at a dead hydrangea bush inches from my face. The brown, withered blooms looked like dried skulls. The world was tilting violently now. The structural integrity of my reality was gone. They weren't just lying to me. They weren't just having an affair. They were manufacturing a disease. They were dismantling my mind brick by brick so they could salvage the copper wiring from the walls. "And Emily?" Jason asked. The mention of my daughter's name made my hands clench into fists so tight my fingernails cut into my palms. "She's the easy part," Linda said dismissively. "I've been dripping poison in her ear for weeks. I told her the dementia is making Thomas aggressive, that he's becoming unpredictable. She's afraid of him, Jason. She's actually afraid of her own father." "Perfect," Jason muttered. "So she'll support the institutionalization. She'll beg for it," Linda said. "She thinks she's protecting her unborn child from a violent maniac." "You're a genius, Mom," Jason said. The wind stopped. The rustling leaves fell silent. My heart stopped beating. "Mom." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my forehead against the cold, rough brick of the house. I replayed the sound in my head, praying I had misheard, praying it was a slang term, a weird joke, anything other than what it was. But the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't sexual. It was deferential. Filial. "Mom." Jason called Linda Mom. They weren't lovers. They were mother and son. The realization hit me with the force of a wrecking ball swinging at full velocity. It shattered everything. The timeline aligned in a terrifying cascade of logic. They had come into our lives at roughly the same time. Linda, the grieving widow I met at the gallery. Jason, the up-and-coming developer who swept my daughter off her feet 6 months later. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a coordinated, tactical assault. They weren't just stealing my money. They were cannibals. They were eating my family from the inside out. They had married us to harvest us. A roar built up in my throat, a primal sound of rage and betrayal. I wanted to smash the glass. I wanted to climb into that library and tear them apart with my bare hands. I wanted to wrap my fingers around Jason's throat and squeeze until the arrogance popped out of his eyes. I took a step forward, my boot crunching on a twig. Inside, the voices stopped. "Did you hear that?" Jason asked sharply. "It's just the wind," Linda said. "Relax. You're jumpy." I froze, pressed against the brick, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. If I went in there now, what would happen? I was a 64-year-old man with a bad hip and a manufactured history of mental instability. They were two healthy predators. They would call the police. They would claim I was having a psychotic break, the violent episode they had already warned Emily about. They would say I was stalking them. I had no evidence. No recording. It was my word against theirs, and they had spent months painting me as senile. If I went in there, I lost. I would end up in a padded room, medicated into oblivion, while they sold my house and poisoned my daughter. I had to be Burster. I had to be the steel that doesn't bend, the concrete that doesn't crack. I had to let the engineer take over, assess the load, calculate the stress points, devise a solution. I stepped back from the window. I placed my feet carefully, rolling from heel to toe to silence my tread. I retreated through the wet garden, the mud sucking at my boots. I reached the truck. I opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, breathing in the smell of old leather and gasoline. I looked in the rearview mirror, gray hair, lined face, sad blue eyes, but the man behind the eyes had changed. Something in the center of my pupils had hardened. Thomas, the husband, was dead. He died in that garden, buried under the wet mulch and the lies. Thomas, the father, was going to war. I started the truck and drove away, leaving the house of lies behind me. I didn't go home. I couldn't face her yet. I couldn't look at that beautiful, venomous face and pretend I didn't know she was my executioner. I drove 5 miles to a roadside diner on Route 9. It was a place of chrome and grease, smelling of burnt coffee and frying bacon. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the back booth, far away from the window. I needed a plan. I needed a team. I took out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts list. I scrolled past my lawyer, past my doctor, down to a number I hadn't used in 6 years. Frank Miller. He was a former police detective who had been pushed out of the force for being too rough, too thorough, and too honest. He worked as a private investigator now. I'd used him years ago to vet contractors for a massive skyscraper project. He was expensive. He was ruthless. And he hated con artists. I hit dial. Miller, a gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Frank, it's Thomas. There was a pause. Thomas, it's been a long time. You sound compressed. What broke? My life, I said. The words tasted like ash. Talk to me. I need a full background check on Linda, my wife, and Jason, my son-in-law. I need you to dig deep. Cross-reference them. Look for birth records in the Midwest. Maybe Florida. I believe they are mother and son. Miller let out a low, sharp whistle. That's a heavy accusation. Thomas, you sure about this? I heard them, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. They are running a long con, and Frank, they're drugging me. The line went silent. When Miller spoke again, the casual tone was gone. He sounded like a cop again. Are you safe right now? I'm at the diner on Route 9. Stay there. I'm coming to you. Do you have any of the substance? No, I said. It's in the house. I need a toxicology kit, I said. And I need it tonight. Before I go back there. I can have it to you in an hour, Miller said. I'll bring a scrambler for your phone too, just in case they have spyware on it. Good. This stays off the books, Frank. No police, not yet. Understood, Miller said. Thomas? Yeah? Don't eat anything until I get there. And don't drink anything you didn't pour yourself. I hung up. I looked at the black coffee steaming in the mug before me. The waitress had poured it. I trusted her more than the woman I had shared my bed with for 3 years. I drank the coffee. It was bitter. It tasted like fuel. I sat there, watching the rain begin to streak the diner windows, transforming the outside world into a blur of gray and neon. I was going to have to walk back into the trap. I was going to have to go home and let her kiss my cheek and hand me a poisoned cup. But this time, I knew where the wires were. This time, I wasn't the load. I was the demolition charge. Miller met me at the diner 20 minutes later. He slid into the booth opposite me, bringing with him the smell of rain and cheap tobacco. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He handed me a small, sterile plastic vial with a screw-top lid and a tamper-proof seal. Get the liquid, he said, his voice low. Don't be a hero, Thomas. If you feel dizzy, if you feel anything off, you get out. You call me. I'll kick the door down myself. I nodded, pocketing the vial. It felt heavy, like a bullet. I can handle it? You're an engineer, not an actor, Miller warned, his eyes searching my face. They are professionals. If they sense you know, they might escalate. Acceleration is the dangerous part of the curve. I know, I said. I'll be the crumbling foundation they expect. I drove home. The rain had turned into a deluge, hammering the roof of the truck. Turning into my driveway felt like steering a ship into a mined harbor. The house lights were blazing, a beacon of warmth in the storm. It looked inviting. It looked like a sanctuary. That was the genius of their architecture. The trap didn't look like a cage until the door was locked. Linda's Mercedes was back in the driveway, parked perfectly straight. She had beaten me back. She had likely taken the highway while I took the back roads. I turned off the ignition. I sat for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. I breathed in. Inhale courage. Exhale the husband. I walked up the front steps. My hand hovered over the brass doorknob. This was the threshold. Once I crossed it, I was undercover in my own life. I opened the door. The smell hit me first. Roast chicken, rosemary, and lemon. It was the scent of 100 happy Sundays. It used to make my mouth water, now it made my stomach turn. It smelled like bait. Thomas, Linda came out of the kitchen. She was wiping her hands on a floral apron. Her face flushed from the heat of the oven. She looked radiant, beautiful in that polished, high-maintenance way that I had once mistaken for class. It was terrifying how good she was at this. There was no trace of the cold, metallic voice I had heard in the garden. Her eyes were wide with manufactured concern. "Where have you been?" she asked, rushing over to me. "I'd been calling you for an hour. I was so worried." She reached for me. I had to force my muscles not to recoil. I let her wrap her arms around my waist. Her body felt rigid against mine. Not soft, not yielding. It felt like a mannequin, a hard, synthetic shell mimicking human affection. "Just driving," I said. I raised a hand and rubbed my forehead, mimicking the gesture I'd seen my father make when the fog started to roll in. I went for bolts, but then I don't know, I let my voice trail off. I injected a tremor into the words. She pulled back, looking up at me. I watched her pupils. I was looking for love, but I found what I expected, a flicker of satisfaction. A tiny predatory dilation. "Did you get lost, honey?" she asked softly. "I think so," I lied. I was on Maple Avenue, and nothing looked right. The street signs, they didn't make sense. It all looked unfamiliar for a moment. "Oh, Thomas." She sighed, a sound of tragic acceptance. She patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. "It's okay. You're home now. You're safe with me." "I'm scared, Linda," I whispered. "My mind feels slippery." She soothed. "Come sit down. I made your tea. It's brewing right now. It will help you relax. Dr. Evans said hydration is key for your cognitive function." She led me into the living room. The fire was lit, crackling cheerfully. On the mahogany side table sat a steaming ceramic mug. Herbal tea. My nightly ritual. For 3 months, she had insisted on this tea. "A special blend for memory," she had said. "Antioxidants." I looked at the mug. The steam curled up in lazy spirals. It was the delivery system. "Drink up," she said, guiding me to my leather armchair. She sat on the sofa opposite me, tucking her legs beneath her. She picked up a magazine, but she didn't read it. She was watching me over the top of the pages. Watching like a hawk watches a field mouse. I lifted the mug. The ceramic was hot against my palms. I brought it to my lips. The smell was peppermint and something else, something bitter and chemical, masked by the strong herbs. I tilted the mug. I let the liquid touch my closed lips, pretending to take a sip, but keeping my teeth clenched tight. "It's hot," I said, lowering the mug with a grimace. "Scalding. Let it cool for a minute," she said, her eyes never leaving the cup. "But don't let it get cold. The compounds work better with heat." "The compounds? I need to use the restroom," I said, standing up unsteadily. I took the mug with me. "Thomas, leave the tea here," she said quickly. "Too quickly. I want to sip it while I wash up," I said, shuffling toward the hallway. I feel a chill coming on. I didn't wait for her permission. I walked into the downstairs powder room and locked the door. My hands were shaking violently now. The adrenaline was crashing. I pulled the vial Miller had given me from my pocket. I poured a generous amount of the tea into the vial, careful not to spill a drop. I screwed the lid on tight, wrapping it in a layer of toilet paper before shoving it deep into my pocket. Then I turned to the sink. I poured the rest of the tea down the drain. I ran the hot water tap full blast for 30 seconds, watching the brown liquid swirl away, washing the ceramic interior until not a trace remained. I flushed the toilet for good measure, sound cover. I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale. I looked like a ghost. Good, I thought. Let them see a ghost. I walked back out with the empty mug. Better? Linda asked. She looked at the empty cup in my hand, and her shoulders visibly relaxed. The tension left her frame. Much, I said. I feigned a yawn. heavy and exaggerated. I feel sleepy already. That worked fast. Good, she smiled. The doctor said, rest is what you need. Why don't you skip dinner and go straight to bed? I'll keep the house quiet. She smiled like she was tucking a child into bed, a child she planned to smother. 2 days later, the sky was a relentless slate gray. Miller contacted me via a burner phone he had slipped me. Home Depot, 10 a.m., Garden Center. I told Linda I was going to look at paint samples for the guest room. She didn't object. She was too busy on the phone with Dr. Evans. I met Miller in the parking lot. He was parked in a rusted sedan far from the entrance. The air smelled of wet asphalt and lumber. It was an industrial, gritty setting, fitting for the demolition of my life. Miller looked grim. He hadn't shaved. He held a thick manila envelope in his hands as if it contained radioactive material. Get in, he said. I climbed into the passenger seat. You were right, Miller said. No preamble. He tossed the envelope onto my lap. And you were wrong. It's worse. I opened the folder. The first photo wasn't Linda. It was a mugshot. Younger, with harder eyes and bleached hair, but unmistakably her. Brenda Kinsley, Miller said. Age 52, not 44. She has a rap sheet in Florida that reads like a how-to guide for grifters. Check fraud. Embezzlement. Insurance scams. And Jason? I asked, flipping the page. Jason Kinsley, her biological son, born when she was 16. They aren't lovers, Thomas. They're partners. They ran a similar con in Tampa 5 years ago. I looked at the photo of a younger Jason. He looked hungry. The mark was a retired surgeon. Miller continued, his voice devoid of emotion. Arthur Hemlock, wealthy, widower. Brenda married him. Jason managed his portfolio. Hemlock died of a heart attack 6 months after the wedding. The autopsy was inconclusive. They cremated him the next day. I felt bowel rise in my throat. They killed him. They got away with it, Miller corrected. They walked away with $4 million. And the toxicology? I asked, my hand trembling as I reached for the lab report. It's a cocktail, Miller said, pointing to the chemical breakdown. High levels of benzodiazepines. That's the sedative. But the kicker is the scopolamine and the synthetic hallucinogen usually found in street drugs. It's designed to cause confusion, paranoia, and suggestibility. It mimics the early stages of aggressive dementia. They are erasing me, I whispered. They are literally scrubbing my mind. Long term, it causes permanent neurological damage. Another month on that tea, Thomas, and you wouldn't have been pretending. You would have been drooling in a cup. I closed the folder. The rage was different now. It wasn't hot. It was cold. Absolute zero. What about Emily? I asked. Did you check the prenatal vitamins? Miller hesitated. He looked out the windshield at a forklift moving pallets of sod. He took a deep breath. I checked the pharmacy records Jason uses, he said. He's picking up pills that look like prenatal vitamins. He swaps the contents. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. They aren't vitamins, Thomas. They are mild sedatives, diluted tranquilizers. The world went white. They're poisoning my pregnant daughter. They need her docile, Miller explained, his voice hard. They need her too tired to question why her father is going crazy. They need her compliant so when they institutionalize you, she just nods her head. That they don't care about the baby, Miller said. To them, the baby is just leverage, or an heir to control later. Thomas, Miller turned to me, gripping my shoulder. Let's call the cops. Now. We have enough for an arrest. The tea, the identity theft, the drugs. I stared at the dashboard. I imagined the police sirens, the handcuffs, the lawyers. No, I said. Thomas, are you crazy? They are poisoning your family. If we arrest them now, they lawyer up, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Calm, detached. They'll claim the drugs were for my own good, that I was self-medicating. They'll claim the identity change was to escape an abusive ex. Jason might get a light sentence. And Emily, I looked at Miller. Emily loves him. She's carrying his child. If I drag him away in handcuffs today, she won't believe it. She's brainwashed. She'll think I framed him. She'll think her crazy father finally snapped. I'll lose her forever. So what's the play? Miller asked. exasperated. I need to break them, I said. I need Emily to see the monster beneath the skin. I need to strip the facade away while she's watching. You want to trap them, Miller said. I'm going to play the game, I said. But I'm changing the rules. I'm going to accelerate the timeline. I looked at the Home Depot sign. You can do it. We can help. I need a team, Frank. I need Sarah Jenkins. The manager at your bank? She's loyal. I've known her for 20 years. I need her to freeze my assets, but make it look like a banking glitch. I need to cut off Jason's oxygen. He'll panic, Miller warned. Panic makes people dangerous. Panic causes structural failure, I corrected. That's exactly what I want. The next morning, the house felt different. It was no longer a home. It was a stage set, and I was the lead actor in a tragedy I hadn't auditioned for. A new face appeared in the kitchen. Maria. She was a housekeeper Linda had hired just 3 days ago to help with the increasing burden of my condition. She was a quiet woman, mid-40s, with nervous, fluttering hands and eyes that spent too much time looking at the floor. I was in my study, pretending to read a blueprint for a bridge I had built 20 years ago. The lines blurred before my eyes, not from age, but from the sheer exhaustion of hypervigilance. Maria came in to dust the bookshelves. She moved like a shadow, afraid to disturb the air. She wiped the mahogany shelf near my desk. She looked at me, then at the open door, then back at me. Her breathing was shallow. Mr. Thomas? She whispered. The sound was barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. I didn't look up immediately. I kept my finger on the blueprint. Yes, Maria. The tea, she said. Her voice trembled, cracking on the vowel. Don't drink it. I stopped tracing the load line on the paper. I slowly raised my head. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terrified urgency. Why? I asked, keeping my voice level. I saw her, Maria whispered, clutching the duster to her chest like a shield. The missus, she puts drops in it, from a blue glass bottle. She hides it in the flour jar in the pantry. She does it when she thinks you are in the bathroom. She was shaking. This woman had been in my house for 72 hours, and she had seen what I had missed for 3 years. Why are you telling me this, Maria? You could lose your job, because my father had Alzheimer's, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I took care of him for 10 years. Mr. Thomas, you don't look like him. You don't have the vacancy. You look alert. She tapped her temple. Her eyes are lying. Your eyes are watching. I stood up and walked around the desk. I took her rough, working hand in mine. Thank you, Maria, I said intensely. You are right. I am alert, and I am in danger. She gasped. Do not tell her you told me. I commanded softly. If she knows you know, she will fire you. And I need you here. Can you be brave? I think so. Good. I need you to be my eyes when I'm not in the room. Just watch. And if I give you a signal, a nod, you leave the room. Understood? Yes, sir. I had an ally inside the walls, a small rivet, but sometimes a single rivet is all that holds the plate together. I initiated the stress test that afternoon. In engineering, a stress test involves applying extreme pressure to a specific point to see when and how it fails. I needed to apply pressure to Jason and Linda. I needed to turn them against each other. I woke up early from a nap I hadn't actually taken. I shuffled downstairs. Linda was drinking coffee at the Granite Island, scrolling through her phone. Linda, I said, my voice thick with confusion. Where is my watch? The gold Patek Philippe. She didn't look up immediately. It's in your safe, darling. You put it there. No, I said, agitation rising in my voice. I looked. It's gone. I think I gave it to Jason. She froze. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She looked up. What? Yesterday. I lied. He was here. He was admiring it. I took it off. I said, I don't need time anymore, and I gave it to him. I watched her process this. The watch was worth $50,000. If I had given it to Jason, that was $50,000 in Jason's pocket that Linda didn't control. You gave it to him? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Yes. Didn't he tell you? I asked innocently. He seemed so happy. He put it in his pocket right away. No, she said, her jaw tightening. He didn't mention it. Oh, I said. Maybe I imagined it, but the wrist feels so light. I wandered away, leaving the seed of suspicion to germinate. He's stealing from the pot, Linda. He's holding out on you. That evening, Jason came for dinner. The atmosphere was already brittle. Linda was staring at him with cold, calculating eyes, likely wondering if he had pawned the watch. Jason looked haggard. He hacked his phone constantly under the table. The investors in Vegas were leaning on him. I could smell the sour scent of his anxiety. Dad, Jason said, cutting into his steak with aggressive force. About the property transfer. The lawyers are ready. We really should sign the power of attorney tomorrow. It will make paying your bills so much easier. I chewed my food slowly. I took a sip of water I had poured myself from the tap. I was thinking, I said, placing my fork down. Maybe I shouldn't sign. Jason stopped chewing. Linda stiffened. What do you mean? Jason asked, a forced smile plastering itself onto his face. I mean, if I'm losing my mind, I said, looking around the room. Why do we need all this? This big house, the stocks, the hassle. I leaned forward. I think I should just sell everything, liquidate the entire portfolio, and donate it to the Structural Engineering Scholarship Fund at the university. Jason choked on his wine. He actually coughed, hacking into his napkin. What? All of it? Yes, I said, beaming like a benevolent saint. I want to leave a legacy of knowledge. If I can't think, I want to help others think. You two are young, you have your health, you can work, you don't need my money. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb counting down. Linda's fork scraped against her plate, a high-pitched screech that made everyone wince. Thomas, that's drastic, she said, her voice tight. You have a family to support. You have a grandchild coming. But I might forget who you are, I said, my voice trembling with fake sorrow. I should do it while I'm lucid. I could call Arthur tomorrow, have him draw up the agenda papers. No, Jason shouted. He slammed his hand on the table. The crystal glasses jumped. He realized his mistake immediately. He lowered his voice, but the venom remained. I mean, let's not be hasty, Dad. Just sign the power of attorney. We'll handle the donations for you. We'll make sure it goes to the right place. He was sweating. A single bead rolled down his temple. Panic. He needed that money to pay off the sharks. If I donated it, he was a dead man. I had just put a gun to his head, and he didn't even know I was holding the trigger. The next day, I escalated. I insisted on going to the bank. I need cash, I told Jason. I want to buy a stroller for the baby. I want to pay for it in cash. Old school. I'll buy it for you, Jason insisted. No, I shouted. I want to do it. I'm still a man, Jason. He had to drive me. He couldn't risk me going alone and saying something stupid. We walked into the bank lobby. The air conditioning was cold. I saw Sarah Jenkins, the bank manager, sitting at her glass-walled desk. She saw me. She saw Jason hovering over me like a prison guard. I walked to the teller. I need to withdraw $5,000, I announced loudly. The teller looked at Jason. Jason stepped between me and the counter. Dad, you don't need that much cash. You'll lose it. I'm not a child, Jason, I snapped. I tried to step around him. Jason grabbed my arm, hard. His fingers dug into the soft tissue of my bicep. It hurt. You are acting like a child, he hissed, his face inches from mine. Get in the car. Now. Jason, you're hurting me, I shouted. I let the fear bleed into my voice. Help! He's hurting me. The lobby went dead silent. Customers filling out slips. Security guards turned. Sarah Jenkins stood up from her desk. She saw Jason's grip. She saw the flash of pure, unadulterated rage in his eyes before he masked it. Jason realized people were staring. He released me instantly, putting on his winning, sympathetic smile. Dad, please, you're having an episode. Everyone is looking. I rubbed my arm. I looked at Sarah. I locked eyes with her. I gave her a tiny, almost invisible nod. She narrowed her eyes. She understood. Freezing the assets as a go. Witnesses. I had witnesses. The emotional cost was mounting. I visited Emily that afternoon. Jason dropped me off, warning me to behave. She looked terrible, pale, shaky, with dark circles under her eyes. The vitamins were working. They were draining the life out of her. "Dad," she said, sitting on the sofa, wrapping a blanket around herself. Tears were standing in her eyes. Linda, she says you're getting violent. She says you pushed her yesterday." My heart broke. They were using my love for her as a weapon. "I never touched her, Emily," I said softly. "You know me. I have never raised a hand to anyone." "I don't know what to believe," she sobbed. "Jason says you're talking to people who aren't there." "Dad, maybe you need to go to that facility. Just for a while. Until the baby comes. I'm scared." "Emily," I said. I sat beside her. I took her cold hands in mine. "Look at me." She wouldn't look. "Emily, look at my eyes." Slowly, she lifted her head. "Do I look lost?" I asked, intense focus. "Do I look like I'm drifting?" She looked. She searched my face. For a moment, she saw her father, the engineer who taught her how to ride a bike, who built her a treehouse that could withstand a hurricane. "No," she whispered. "You look angry." "Hold on to that," I whispered. "Just for 2 more days? Trust your gut, Emily, not their words. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, unsure, terrified. I hated them for this more than anything else. Not for the money, not for the drugs, but for making my daughter look at me with fear. The final piece of their trap arrived the next morning. Linda brought a man to the house. "This is Dr. Allister," she said. He was a small man with shifty eyes and a suit that cost more than my car. A specialist, she called him. Miller had briefed me. Dr. Allister was a disgraced psychiatrist who had lost his license in 2 states for overprescribing. He was a gun for hire. He sat me down in the living room. Linda and Jason stood behind him. "Who is the president?" he asked. "Eisenhower," I said. "What year is it?" 1985. If I answered wrong on purpose. I needed them to feel confident. I needed them to think the bridge was collapsing. "I see," Dr. Allister said, scribbling in a notebook. He turned to Linda. "Significant cognitive decline. Rapid onset dementia with aggressive tendencies. I recommend immediate custodial care. He is a danger to himself and others." He handed Jason a paper. "This is the medical evaluation. With this, the judge will grant the power of attorney. Immediately." Jason took the paper. His hands were shaking with excitement. He looked at Linda. They shared a look of pure triumph. "Thank you, doctor," I said. "You've been very thorough." I waited until they were in the hallway, celebrating in hushed whispers. I took out my burner phone. I texted Arthur Sterling, my lawyer. "Draft the trap. Bring it Friday night. 7. Then I texted Miller. "Friday, 7 p.m. Bring the higher authority. It ends then." I walked to the window and looked out at the darkening sky. The storm had passed, but the pressure was still dropping. I was going to end it on Friday. A family dinner. The final unveiling. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The old man was gone. The engineer was ready to pull the pin. Friday evening arrived with the heavy, suffocating stillness of a held breath. The storm front had passed, leaving the air brittle and cold. The house felt electric. Every light was on, blazing against the night, a beacon of celebration for a victory they hadn't yet won. Linda wore a red gown. It was silk, low-cut, the color of fresh arterial blood. She had had her hair done. She wore the diamond necklace I had given her for our first anniversary. She looked like she was going to a coronation. She moved with a fluid, predatory grace, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing imaginary wrinkles. She thought she had crossed the finish line. Jason arrived at 6:45. He wore his best charcoal suit, the one he saved for closing big deals. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. His eyes were darting around the room, manic and bright. The investors in Vegas had given him until midnight. He was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers, and he thought I was his safety net. Emily sat in the corner of the dining room. She looked small, diminished. She wore a gray cardigan wrapped tight around her swollen belly. She wouldn't look at me. She stared at the tablecloth, her fingers twisting a napkin into a tight spiral. I sat at the head of the table. I was dressed in a simple button-down and slacks. I felt calm, It was the icy, detached calm of an engineer watching the countdown on a controlled demolition. The charges were set. The perimeter was clear. All that was left was to push the button. "Dinner is served," Maria whispered, placing a roast on the table. She caught my eye for a fraction of a second, a terrified flicker before retreating to the kitchen. She knew what was coming. We ate in silence. The only sounds were the scrape of silver against china and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick, tock, counting down the seconds of their rearm. When the plates were cleared, Jason didn't wait for coffee. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He spread them out on the mahogany table like a tarot spread of doom. Power of attorney, transfer of deed. Medical proxy, living will. "Here's a pen, Thomas," Jason said. He offered me a heavy mud block. His hand trembled slightly, the gold tip vibrating in the air. He was so close to the money he could taste it. "Let's get the paperwork out of the way so you can rest." I took the pen. It felt cold and heavy. I looked at the paper. The legal language swam before me. Words designed to strip a man of his agency, his home, his life. The room went silent. Linda leaned forward, her red lips slightly parted, her eyes hungry. Emily looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she whispered, "please, just do it. It's for the best." I looked at my daughter. My heart clenched. They had broken her spirit. "Before I sign," I said. My voice was low, devoid of the tremor I had feigned for weeks. It was deep, resonant. "What is it?" Linda asked, a flash of impatience crossing her face. "Do you need water?" "I know," I said. I set the pen down on the table with a deliberate click. I looked Jason in the eye. Then Linda, "Do you believe in second chances?" Linda blinked, confused by the shift in tone. She recovered quickly, putting on her mask of benevolence. "Of course, honey, that's what we are. A second chance." "Good," I said, "because I want to give you one." I leaned back in my chair. I crossed my arms. The posture of the confused old man evaporated. In his place sat the man who had built skyscrapers. "I know about the debt, Jason," I said clearly. "The $2 million you owe to the syndicates in Las Vegas. I know they threatened to break your legs if you didn't pay by tonight." Jason froze. The smile didn't just fade. It fell off his face like wet plaster. His skin turned a sickly ash-gray color. "Dad, I don't know what. And I know about Tampa, Brenda," I said, turning my gaze to my wife. The color drained from Linda's face so fast she looked like a corpse. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "What did you call me?" she whispered. "Brenda Kinsley," I said, enunciating every syllable. "And Jason Kinsley. Not lovers. Not in-laws. Mother and son. Con artists. Murderers." Emily gasped. It was a wet, choking sound. "Dad? What are you saying?" "They aren't who they say they are, Emily," I said, keeping my eyes locked on the predators. "They targeted us. They came into our lives to harvest us. They poisoned me with hallucinogens, to make me look crazy. And they poisoned you with sedatives to keep you quiet." "He's hallucinating," Jason yelled. He jumped up, his chair clattering backward onto the floor. "He's having a psychotic break. Don't listen to him, Emily. He's insane. I'm not signing anything," I said calmly, "and the accounts are frozen. Sarah Jenkins locked them at 4:00 p.m. today. You can't access a dime." Jason looked at the papers, then at me, then at his phone. He tapped the screen frantically. He saw the notification. "Access denied." The panic in his eyes turned into something else. "Something feral. You senile old bat," Jason hissed. "The charm was gone. The monster was out. You ruined it. You ruined everything." "I gave you a chance," I said. "I really did. I sat here and gave you 10 seconds to confess. To run." "Run?" Linda laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound. "We aren't running anywhere. We worked for this. We earned this." She looked at Jason. Her eyes were hard and flat. "Fix this, Jason."
"No!"
Emily screamed, standing up, clutching her stomach. "Jason, what is going on? Who is Brenda?" "Shut up." Jason roared at her. He reached into his jacket pocket. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the motion. I saw the glint of metal. He pulled out a gun, a small, black semi-automatic pistol. Cheap, deadly. Emily screamed, a high, piercing shriek of pure terror. Jason! Linda screamed, but she didn't move to stop him. She looked at me with pure distilled hatred. Just sign it, Thomas. Don't be a hero. Sign the damn papers. Jason leveled the gun at me. The barrel was shaking. Sign it, he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. Sign the power of attorney. Then transfer the funds. Do it now, or I swear to God I will paint the walls with your brains. I can't, I said. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Why not? He screamed. Are you ready to die, old man? No, I said. But the money is gone, Jason. Even if I sign, you can't get it. Sarah flagged the accounts for fraud. The FBI is watching the transaction logs. Jason's eyes went wide. He swung the gun wildly. He pointed it at Emily. No, I shouted, half rising from my chair. Sit down, Jason shrieked. He pressed the barrel toward Emily's chest. You called the feds? You betrayed family? You aren't family, I said, my voice shaking with rage for the first time. You are a parasite. I'll kill her, Jason breathed. He was hyperventilating. I'll kill her and the baby. Sign the paper. Jason, stop. Emily sobbed. Please, it's me. It's your wife. You're nothing. Jason spat. You were just the mark. A stupid rich girl. I looked at Linda. Call him off, Brenda. This is murder. Fraud is one thing. Killing a pregnant woman is the needle. Linda looked at the gun, then at the papers. She made a calculation. Do it, she whispered. I stared at her. What? Shoot him, Linda said to Jason, pointing at me. Shoot the old man. We'll say he attacked us. Self-defense. We'll make Emily back us up. She looked at Emily with cold, dead eyes. You'll back us up, won't you, sweetie? Or do you want to lose the baby? It was the most evil thing I had ever heard. The beam snapped. The structure failed. I can't sign, I said again, louder. Why? Jason screamed. Because, I said, looking past him to the French doors that led to the patio. I saw the shadow move. I'm not the one in charge anymore. Crash? The glass of the French doors shattered inward in a shower of glittering diamonds. Fifth BI, drop the gun. The room erupted in noise and light. Red laser dots danced across Jason's chest and forehead. Miller kicked the remains of the doorframe open, his own weapon drawn. A swarm of armored agents flooded the room, their boots heavy on the hardwood. Police! Get down! Down! Jason spun around, wild-eyed. For a terrifying second, the gun wavered between me and the agents. Drop it, or you die. Miller screamed, his voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. Jason looked at the agents. He looked at Linda. He looked at the gun. He dropped it. It clattered on the floor, sliding under the table. Jason fell to his knees, hands interlaced behind his head. He was sobbing now, a pathetic, broken sound. Linda didn't move. She sat in her chair, stiff as a A2. She picked up her wineglass and took a sip. Her hand was steady. She was already planning her defense. Two agents grabbed Jason, slamming him face first into the floor. Jason Kinsley, you are under arrest. Another agent moved toward Linda. Brenda Kinsley, stand odd. Put your hands behind your back. She stood up slowly, smoothing her red silk dress. She looked at me. Her mask had fallen off completely. There was no beauty left, only a jagged, ugly emptiness. He was boring, she spat, looking me right in the eyes, just like the others. You were all so boring. The agent spun her around and cuffed her. The click of the steel ratchet was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Sarah Jenkins walked in behind the police. She looked at Brenda, then at the table covered in papers. The assets are safe, Thomas, she said, her voice shaking slightly. It's over. I didn't answer. I walked past the agents. I walked past Jason, who was being dragged out, screaming obscenities. I walked to the corner of the room. Emily was curled in a ball on the floor, rocking back and forth. Emily, I whispered. I knelt down. My knees cracked. I felt every year of my age. It's okay, I said. I pulled her into my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder, wailing. He had a gun, she cried. He said, I was nothing. He was lying, I promised, stroking her hair. He was a lie. But we are real. We are still here. I looked up. Miller was standing over me. He holstered his weapon. He gave me a nod. I looked at the empty doorway where the glass lay shattered. The cold night air rushed in, blowing the unsealed power of attorney off the table. The structure had held, just barely, but the cleanup was going to take a long time. The hours following the raid were a blur of flashing blue lights and the static of police radios. The house on Maple Avenue, once a symbol of my success, was now a crime scene. Yellow tape crisscrossed the front door like scars. Evidence technicians in white Tyvek suits swarmed the property, bagging the tea, the blue bottle from the pantry, and the gun that had been pointed at my daughter's chest. I sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over my shoulders. Emily was inside the vehicle being checked by paramedics. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, a physical manifestation of the terror she had endured. Miller stood next to me, lighting a cigarette. His hands were shaking slightly. Even for a man who had seen the worst of humanity, tonight had been close. "You cut it fine, Thomas," he said, exhaling smoke into the cold night air. "I had to," I said, watching them lead Brenda into a squad car. She didn't look back. She sat in the back seat, staring straight ahead, her face a mask of stone. She was already calculating her next move, likely figuring out which lawyer she could charm or manipulate. "The structural integrity held," I murmured. "Barely," Miller said. "But barely is enough." The trial began 4 months later. It became a media circus, the kind of sensational story that people devour with their morning coffee, unaware of the real lives bleeding between the headlines. The papers called them the Black Widow and her son. I sat in the front row every day. I needed to see it. I needed to witness the demolition of their lies. The evidence Miller and I had gathered was insurmountable. The audio recording from the library window where I first heard them plotting was played in open court. Hearing those voices again discussing my incoherence and dosages sent a hush through the courtroom. The toxicology reports were damning, showing a lethal cocktail of sedatives and hallucinogens in my blood and Emily's. The hidden camera footage Maria had helped capture showed Brenda dosing the tea with the precision of a chemist. But the real spectacle was the collapse of their partnership. Con artists rely on a shared reality, a mutual trust in the lie. Once the pressure was applied, that trust shattered. Jason turned first. His lawyer argued that he was a victim of his mother's manipulation, that he had been groomed from childhood to be her accomplice. He wept on the stand, pointing a trembling finger at Brenda. "She told me what to do," he sobbed, looking pathetic and small. "She said he was dying anyway. She said we were just hurrying it up." Brenda didn't weep. She sat motionless, her eyes cold and reptile dead. When her turn came, she didn't plead for mercy. She attacked. She claimed Jason was the mastermind, a violent drug addict who had forced her to participate. It was ugly. It was a cannibalistic feeding frenzy. They tore each other apart to save themselves, revealing the rot that had always been at their core. The jury didn't buy any of it. They deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen enough of their kind, showed no leniency. "You preyed on trust," she told them at the end. "You dismantled a family for profit. You are not criminals. You are termites in the framework of society. 25 years each. No parole for at least 15. As the bailiffs led them away, Jason looked back at Emily, his eyes pleading. Emily didn't look away. She stared right through him, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. She had learned the lesson I had taught her: inspect the foundation. I sold the house on Maple Avenue a week after the verdict. I couldn't live there. Every room held a ghost. The kitchen where she poisoned me. The library where they plotted my death. The dining room where a gun was drawn on my pregnant daughter. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a monument to my blindness. I sold it to a young couple who knew nothing of its history. I hoped they would paint over the memories. I bought a smaller place near the coast, 2 hours north. It's a modern build, glass and steel, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. It's sturdy, The wind batters it. The salt spray coats the windows, but the steel doesn't yield. I like the honesty of the ocean. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than dangerous and beautiful. Emily moved in with me. The divorce from Jason was swift, handled by Arthur Sterling, with ruthless efficiency. It took time for her to heal. The betrayal of a husband, the realization that every "I love you" was a calculated move in a long con, is a deep, jagged wound. It doesn't heal clean. It leaves a scar. But she is strong. She has her mother's resilience, and I'd like to think a bit of my stubbornness. She had the baby in the spring. A boy. She named him William, after my father. When I first held him, tiny and fragile in my weathered hands, I felt a terrified joy. I looked at his small, unformed face and promised him, silently, that I would check every bolt, every beam, every rivet of his life. No one would ever get to him. This morning I sat on the deck, watching the sunrise bleed orange and gold across the gray water. The air was sharp with salt and cold, biting at my exposed skin. I had a mug of coffee in my hand, black. I grind the beans myself now. I boil the water. I pour it. I don't let anyone else make it for me. It's a small thing, a paranoid habit perhaps. But it's my way of keeping the control I almost lost. I thought about that Tuesday in October. I thought about the pain in my hip and the impulse to take the shortcut. It haunts me sometimes, the terrifying fragility of that moment. If I hadn't taken the shortcut, if I hadn't seen the Mercedes, if I hadn't stopped the truck, I would be dead, buried in a plot next to Martha, my heart stopped by a natural attack induced by chemicals. Emily would be institutionalized or medicated into compliance. William would have grown up calling a monster daddy, raised to be the next generation of grifter, or worse. The difference between life and death, between legacy and ruin, was a single glance, a single moment of intuition. Life is structure. We like to think it's built on emotion and memories, but it's really built on beams and rivets of trust. We rely on the people around us to hold up their share of the load, but sometimes metal fatigues. Sometimes rot sets in behind the drywall, where you can't see it. Sometimes the people who claim to be your pillars are actually the dynamite. You have to inspect the foundation. You can't get lazy. You have to look for the cracks, the hairline fractures, and the smile, the dissonance in a voice, the car parked in the shadows. And when you find them, you don't paint over them. You don't hope they'll go away. You fix them, or if the rot is too deep, you tear the whole damn thing down and build something new. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot, bitter, and safe. I looked at my hands. They were steady. No tremors, no confusion. The fog was gone. The glass door behind me slid open. Emily walked out, holding William wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. She smiled at me, a real smile, not a mask. "Coffee?" she asked. "I made a fresh pot," I said. "It's on the counter." "Thanks, Dad." She sat beside me, watching the ocean churn against the rocks below. "I am Thomas. I am a builder. My house fell down, but I saved the people inside, and I am still standing. We are all builders in our own lives, constantly inspecting our foundations against the storms. If this story of survival and justice resonated with you, if you felt the weight of the load and the strength of the steel, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It tells me that there are others out there who know the value of standing tall when the world tries to tear you down. Let's keep building together.